The UFC makes its return to Winnipeg, Canada for the first time since December of 2017 this upcoming weekend for UFC Fight Night Burns vs. Malott, where we will not only see Gilbert Burns defending his number 11 ranking in the welterweight division against the surging Canadian in Mike Malott, but we will also see two other pretty fun ranked matchups on the card, including Kyler Phillips putting up his bantamweight top 15 ranking against Charles Jourdain, and a top 10 women's flyweight clash between Canada's own Jasmine Jasudavicius and Karine Silva. So let's discuss all three of these ranked matchups, and we begin with the main event of the evening as the former title challenger Gilbert Burns is looking to crack his 4-fight losing streak and hold his spot in the top 15 of 170, the Shark Tank that it is, before it's too late. For the 39-year-old Burns, he has not came out of a fight victorious since April of 2023 when he would have a unanimous decision win over Jorge Masvidal at UFC 287, and since then it is all red on his resume. Losses to Bilal Muhammad, albeit a former champion, Jack Della Maddalena, a former champion, and a fight that he was winning up until one of the best comebacks of 2024, Sean Brady, a top 10 ranked fighter, and Michael Morales, someone who is potentially the next welterweight title challenger to Islam Makhachev's throne. So he is quite literally fighting nothing but the best of the best in this 170-pound division, and even if you peel the curtain back a little bit more, his other losses over the past 5 years were to Kamaru Usman in a championship bout where he nearly knocked out Kamaru and ended his dominant reign, and against Khamzat Chimaev, who is now the middleweight champion of the world. And so this resume is levels above anything that Mike Malott has faced so far in his UFC career, but regardless of which way you want to view it, Burns has lost 6 of his last 9 bouts. And so he is in desperate need to get a victory here in Canada, otherwise any hopes he has of reaching the top 10, reaching the top 5, or ever getting close to title contention again is out the window for good. And for proper Mike Malott, ever since his debut in April of 2022, he has been titled as one of the best prospects out of Canada and someone that can be the next big hope for them in terms of title contenders, alongside fellow Canadian Jasmine Jasudavicius that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And that claim to fame was rightfully earned by Malott, as entering his UFC debut in April of 2022, he had finished all 11 of his professional victories and only tasted defeat one prior time. And throughout the 7 bouts that he has had leading into his first main event this upcoming weekend, he has gone 6-1, with his only loss coming to Neil Magny, the all-time leader in victories for the welterweight division, in a fight that he was winning up until giving it away late in the 3rd round. As a matter of fact, only 15 seconds remained in what was the second best comeback of 2024, and only second to the aforementioned JDM comeback against Gilbert Burns. But since that loss, Mike Malott has bounced back with 3 consecutive victories over Trevin Giles, a knockout against Charles Jourdain, and a decision win over Kevin Holland, the biggest one of his career to date. But now at 34, he's no longer right in the middle of his prime, but rather at the end of his prime, and so the time is now for him to strike while the iron is hot and capitalize on the lack of momentum of the former title challenger Gilbert Burns, while he still has a relatively big name at 170 pounds, and crash into the top 15 and borderline the top 10 come next Tuesday morning. In Malott's 16 professional bouts, he has only seen the scorecards 3 times, been finished in both of his losses, and finished 11 out of his 13 victories, and so he is constantly looking to damage his opponents and look for the finish, whereas his opponent Burns does see the scorecards a little bit more, even though he essentially has double the amount of professional bouts as Malott, but all in all has been finished in 4 of his 9 losses and finished 15 of his 22 victories. And so not only does he have more high-level experience in terms of name value, but he has almost double the fights, as I said, and has been in the UFC fighting under the world's greatest mixed martial arts promotion since 2014, and will be entering his 5th UFC main event in Winnipeg, Canada. So he also has a plethora of 5-round experience to his name as well. So what do you foresee happening in this UFC Winnipeg main event? Will Mike Malott get the victory in front of his Canadian home crowd and break into the top 15 of the welterweight division for the first time, thus getting the biggest win of his career? Or does Gilbert Burns still have enough gas left in the tank to fend off a surging contender who does not have anywhere near the accolades of those other losses that Burns has racked up heading into this event? And with all of the other massive names in the top 10 of this welterweight division right now, not only is it important for Burns to get a bounce-back victory and to remain relevant, not only is it important for Mike Malott to insert himself into the rankings, but dare I say, I think a big performance is needed no matter who the winner is, just to have your name amongst the players in this division, because it seems like everyone has their name in the hat for title contention, including Michael Morales, including Ian Machado Gary, including Shavkat Rakhmonov, even though he's recovering from injury, including Carlos Prates and Jack Della Maddalena, who are fighting just 2 weeks after this event, and Sean Brady and Joaquin Buckley, who are fighting 3 weeks after this event at UFC 328. This main event here at UFC Winnipeg in Canada is getting the ball rolling for this welterweight division and its 2026 calendar, because from here we go into those next two matchups, JDM versus Prates and Buckley versus Brady, and then it looks like we're going to be seeing a title fight in August, which was just announced to be going down in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, UFC 330. However, it's not confirmed, but it looks like Makhachev will be defending the welterweight throne for the first time. It's just a matter of if it will be Michael Morales or Ian Machado Gary standing across from him. And so the welterweight division, 170 pounds, you're up next. Well, this is awkward, but I'm just now realizing that Kyler Phillips is no longer ranked in the bantamweight division, but damn it, he's probably 16 or 17, and I already talked about it in the intro, so let's talk about this co-main event against Charles Jourdain. Phillips will enter UFC Winnipeg riding a 2-fight losing streak, losses to Vinicius Oliveira and Rob Font in October of 2024 and July of 2025, but prior to that had won 3 fights in a row and 6 out of 7 to begin his UFC career, with the only other loss coming to Rolian Paiva in July of 2021. And Kyler Phillips holds very good wins on his resume, including Song Yadong, Raoni Barcelos, and Pedro Munoz, and so it's not like he can't perform when he faces those biggest names. However, when it comes to defending his top 15 ranking, that is where he faltered to Font and to Vinicius Oliveira. But at 30 years old, the Matrix is right now in his prime, and with a record of 12-4, I do believe he is someone in this bantamweight division that does still hold promise and potential. He's very well rounded, he's very slick in terms of his movement, and I still think that he can string together some victories to not only reinsert himself into the bantamweight top 15, but make a push toward the top 10 if all goes his way. But he does enter UFC Winnipeg as the betting underdog, as he will be taking on the Canadian Charles Jourdain, who is on a 2-fight submission win streak with victories over Victor Henry in November of 2024, and in his lone fight of 2025, he picked up a win against Davey Grant. But where Charles Jourdain differs most from Kyler Phillips is that when he faces the biggest names of his career and gets those big jumps in competition, that is where he does falter. Just see the fights against Jean Silva, against Sean Woodson, against Nathaniel Wood, and against Shane Burgos, all of whom are the 4 biggest names on his UFC record, and all 4 of them have beaten him. But I'm telling you right now, this man is an all-action fighter, and much like Phillips, he is just now in his prime at 30 years old and has a very high finishing rate, finishing 15 of his 17 wins with 8 knockouts and 7 submissions. And although he has 8 losses to his name, he is extremely durable, having only been finished twice out of those 8 losses, even though he is no stranger to getting into firefights. And if he can pick up his 3rd straight win here and potentially get another finish in front of his home crowd, he will be facing a top 15 bantamweight next, and could be a very fun addition to this absolutely loaded 135-pound weight class. Because let us not forget, he was previously fighting in the featherweight division up until that Victor Henry win in 2024, so now he's looking to go 3-0 at 135. And lastly, we head to the other ranked matchup on the card, and this is a very fun fight that I'm looking forward to, as Jasmine Jasudavicius, the number 7 ranked women's flyweight in the world, is looking to bounce back from her loss to Manon Fior last October, and in order to do so, she will be taking on the 9th ranked Karine Silva, who will also be entering looking to bounce back following a December loss to Macy Barber. For Jasmine Jasudavicius, although she is 37 years of age, she sure does not look like it when she is in the cage, because prior to that Manon Fior loss, she was the hottest fighter going at 125 pounds, tallying off 5 straight wins between January of 2024 and May of 2025, also being the most active fighter on the women's flyweight roster by far. And 3 of those 5 wins came by way of submission, including the one against former champion Jessica Andrade that would place Jasmine in that number 1 contender matchup against Fior. She also, during that win streak, held wins over Mayra Bueno Silva, a former bantamweight title challenger, Ariane Lipski da Silva, Fatima Klein, who is now an absolute beast in the strawweight division, and Priscilla Cachoeira. And we can't forget that she also holds victories over top 15 ranked fighters Gabriela Fernandez and Miranda Maverick, and the only other losses on her UFC record are to Tracy Cortez, a top 10 fighter, and Natalia Silva, the number 1 contender in this weight weight class that should absolutely be facing Valentina Shevchenko next. And so this does feel like a spot for Jasmine to bounce back and to do it in front of her Canadian home crowd. I think in terms of X's and O's, in terms of stylistic matchups, this is a fight that makes sense for her and a fight that is definitely winnable, and to put her name right back into the elite discussions of this women's flyweight division against Karine Silva. And that's not me disrespecting Silva, by the way, because she's 5-2 in the UFC since debuting in June of 2022, and her only 2 losses are to ranked fighters as well, Viviane Araújo and the aforementioned Barber loss. And although her last 4 fights have gone the full 15 minutes with 2 wins and 2 losses, when you look at her entire 25-fight career, she has only seen the scorecards 5 times total. So before those last 4, she had only gone the full distance 1 other time and has finished 17 of her 19 wins with 9 knockouts and 8 submissions and been finished in 3 of her 5 losses. However, she is still in her prime at 32 and will be 5 years younger than Jasmine Jasudavicius, so she is in need of a bounce-back win here. Obviously, both of them are, but I think for Silva, she's yet to really prove herself as much as Jasmine, so getting a win against her would do a lot more for her than it would Jasmine beating Silva, in my opinion. And Jasmine will absolutely be looking to take advantage of the 21% takedown defense of Karine Silva, because Jasmine is one of the best pure wrestlers in this women's flyweight division, and if she can have success there and get Karine Silva down, she doesn't just get her opponents down to the mat and hold them there, she goes in for the kill. She deals insane damage and looks for the finish. And so for Silva, although she does average 2.3 takedowns per 15 minutes in her own right, I think her best path to victory is to keep this fight standing, because I don't foresee her being able to offensively grapple and have success against Jasmine. And so her best path to victory is to keep the fight standing, defend the takedowns, which she has shown issues doing in her previous bouts, and to try and pick apart Jasmine on the feet and potentially look for a knockout like Manon Fiorot was able to do just a few months ago. As for the rest of the card, there are fun matchups and there are plenty of Canadian fighters, but from a storyline perspective, that is where this card is truly lacking. However, we will see some relatively big name veterans like Jai Herbert competing, Thiago Moises. Tanner Boser is re-debuting back into the UFC. That's someone to keep your eyes on. And damn it, I'm actually pissed at myself because I just realized there is another ranked matchup on this card and it stays in the women's flyweight division. So let's finish the UFC Winnipeg discussion with this one. The number 14 ranked veteran JJ Aldrich is taking on Canada's own Jamey-Lyn Horth. JJ Aldrich is entering her 10th year of competition in the UFC, dating back to December 9th of 2016, and at 33 years old is right now finding her groove and has won 3 of her last 4 bouts heading into UFC Winnipeg, including victories over Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa, and the lone loss during that stretch is to Veronica Hardy, who at that point in May of 2024 was having a bit of a resurgence in her own right. The biggest problem for JJ is that she doesn't really have much of a finishing prowess, as over the course of her 14 professional wins has only secured 3 knockouts with 11 decision victories, although having been finished in nearly half of her losses with 3 by way of stoppage and 4 decisions in her 7 professional L's. And the 36-year-old Jamey-Lyn Horth also enters UFC Winnipeg having won 3 of her last 4 and comes off of a knockout win against Teresa Bleda in December of last year. And her lone loss during those last 4 fights came to Miranda Maverick, someone who is much higher ranked right now than Veronica Hardy and is recovering from a knee injury right now after her loss to Rose Namajunas. And Jamie also finishes fights at a higher clip than JJ with 6 wins out of her 9 by way of finish with 4 knockouts and 2 submissions. And you've got to think she's got a fire lit under her heading into her Canadian home crowd fight here, where if she gets a victory against Aldrich, will be entering the women's flyweight top 15 with aspirations of reaching top 10 in her next outing. So I want to hear from you down in the comments below. Give me your predictions and the fights that you are looking forward to most on this UFC Winnipeg card. And if there are fights that I didn't discuss in this breakdown, sound off down below on which ones you're looking forward to. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, as every single week I break down the biggest fights and storylines heading into each card. In the aftermath of each card, I recap the most meaningful results, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you all in the next video.